Hela isn't Hela. Okay, so Cate Blanchett's character from Thor Ragnarok is clearly Hela. She looks like Hela. She's named Hela. She even walks the way I always assumed Hela would walk, and yet she isn't exclusively Hela. You see, most Marvel heroes are pretty direct adaptations of their comic counterparts. Movie Spidey is more or less the same as comic Spidey. Same history, same power, same personality. You can't say the same for Hela. Much like Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, she is clearly an amalgamation of some other well-known and less well-known characters. So we're going to look at 6 Marvel Comics characters that I think influenced in one way or another the MCU version of Hela, as well as another thing. And the first is Hela. Yeah, I mean, movie Hela is clearly based on comic Hela. Besides her name, Hela's outfit is probably the biggest signal. Hela wears a skin-tight green and black suit with a flowing black cape, and it's all tied together by a gigantic Tim Burton chandelier on her head. Hela is one of the most distinct Marvel comic profiles, and that translated flawlessly to the screen. She refers to herself as the goddess of death, although it's unclear how she fits into that picture. When Hela resurrects the Asgardian soldiers, she demonstrates her control over life and death, but in the comics, Hela rules over a realm called Niflheim, and within it, Hell. Even though it's called Hell, it isn't necessarily where the bad people go. Anyone that dies shows up there and just kind of hang out. It's cold and dreary, it's like purgatory. That fiery realm you probably pictured when I said Hell is actually called Muspelheim. That's where Surtur and the fire demons live, and it's where Thor Ragnarok starts. Surtur is kind of like the devil, but Marvel Comics already has a devil named Mephisto who gives Ghost Rider powers and ruins Spider-Man comics. Anyway, Hela's all about souls. Problem is, Asgardians don't end up in Hell. When an Asgardian dies, they go to Valhalla. So most of the time, Hela is trying to acquire Asgardian souls because they're valuable to her, and she is obsessed with Odin and Thor. Sure, from time to time, she's attempted to take over Asgard like she does in the movie, but Hela is traditionally laser-focused on capturing rare and powerful Asgardian souls. But there are some pretty big differences between movie and comic Hela. In the comics, for example, Hela is the daughter of Loki, kind of. I don't think it's ever been 100% confirmed, but Loki's almost certainly Hela's father. In the film, however, Hela was a secret daughter of Odin, which matches up nicely to a new Marvel Comics character named Angela. Well, I mean, Angela was originally a McFarlane Comics character. She was created by Neil Gaiman as part of the Spawn universe. I describe her as kind of a more violent version of Wonder Woman. Confident, feminine, fierce, a little out of touch, raised by a race of warrior angels in a secret realm. And recently, there was a dispute between McFarlane and Gaiman over who actually held the rights to Angela. Gaiman won, and as part of the Age of Ultron Marvel comic event, he brought Angela over to the Marvel comic universe. But since Angela didn't fit into the existing Marvel canon, they retconned Angela by making her Odin's secret daughter. See, there used to be a 10th realm called Heaven that started a war with Asgard. During the war, Odin's daughter Angela disappeared and was presumed dead. Heaven lost the war and was cut off from the other 9 realms, and everyone forgot they existed. What no one knew was that Angela was taken to Heaven and raised by the angels. Now, Angela doesn't have the kind of ambition that Hela had in Thor Ragnarok. She doesn't want to rule Asgard, even though as the oldest sibling, she technically is the rightful heir to the throne. She just wants to travel the galaxy and find her place in the universe. Actually, funny story, Angela was also in charge of Hell for like 10 minutes. After her girlfriend, Sarah, was killed, Angela went to Hell to retrieve Sarah's soul. Hela wouldn't give her the soul, so Angela completed 3 trials to gain the opportunity to challenge Hela for rule of Hell, and she won. All she did as Queen of Hell was change a couple of rules relating to the souls of angels and free Sarah. Once she got that done, she quit, leaving her brother Baldur in charge. So neither Angela nor comic Hela are really as interested in taking over Asgard as movie Hela. Movie Hela seems to have gotten that from a comic character named Kull. Kull Borson, or the Serpent as he's sometimes known, is the secret brother of Odin. Yeah, Odin has a lot of family members coming out of the woodwork. He's like a lottery winner. Kull was Odin's brother, and for a brief time the king of Asgard, but he became obsessed with fear, and Odin was forced to cast Kull out of Asgard and imprison him beneath the ocean. Eventually, Kull got enough power to break free and attempted to take over Asgard again in the Fear Itself comic story from a few years back. And it looks like the crazy member of the royal family was banished by Odin and erased from everyone's memory plot, got lifted directly from Kull and transported onto movie Hela. One thing I can't quite figure out from Thor Ragnarok, and I'd love to hear in the comments so you guys think, is what Hela was doing while she was imprisoned. Like I mentioned before, in the comics, she's traditionally in charge of the afterlife. She has a job. Kull's just imprisoned. Imagine he's lifting weights or bouncing a ball against the wall of his cell. Thor Ragnarok gave me the impression that Hela was also just in jail, but I'm honestly not sure. I'm wondering what you guys think. Either way, Hela clearly has Kull's ambition and at least some of his backstory. Number 4 isn't necessarily a trait or like a history that movie Hela herself has. It's really a relationship to one of her allies. In Thor Ragnarok, once Hela reaches Asgard, she teams up with Scourge and names him her executioner. And after a lot of not executing people, Scourge heroically gains redemption by sacrificing himself to protect the people of Asgard. The whole bit at the end is ripped directly from a comic story that is just great. Love seeing it in the movie. But Scourge isn't known for working with Hela. While he does from time to time join forces with other villains, Scourge is almost exclusively the bodyguard of an Asgardian named Amora, also known as the Enchantress. Amora is a powerful powerful sorcerer. She's kind of like Loki. Sometimes she's like a plain old villain. Sometimes she wants to take over Asgard. Sometimes she wants to save it. She's very self-interested and does what she has to do to survive. She's also in love with Thor and frequently scheming to marry him, which doesn't usually work. She's probably the highest profile Thor villain that hasn't yet been used in a movie. And since we haven't seen either of them, it might actually be a lot of fun if both Amora and Angela showed up for Thor 4. But the Enchantress doesn't usually work alone. In the comics, Scourge the Executioner is in love with Amora and will do anything for her. While she doesn't seem to love him back, Amora does keep Scourge around, manipulating him to fighting for her. Now this doesn't map directly to the film. Scourge is motivated not by love, but by desire to get recognition, and it seems mostly not to be lanced. He's not a bad guy. I don't even think Opportunist covers it. He just isn't the kind of honorable Asgardian that we're used to. So when Scourge sidles up with Hela, it isn't the same kind of relationship he has in the comics with Amora. But the fact that movie Hela recruited Scourge to be a bodyguard is clearly inspired by the Enchantress. Number 5. In the comics, Hela is known for fighting via magic spells. A lot of your classic green lines and lightning bolts and stuff like that. She'll summon a zombie or two from time to time. She also uses a sword, but that's about it. In Thor Ragnarok, Hela has the power to generate swords, kind of pull them out of thin air. And originally I attributed this to Mordo, but some very helpful YouTubers pointed out that this is actually a power from someone called Gorr, aka the God Butcher. He's a pretty recent creation. If you've heard the biblical story of Job, it starts the same way and goes in a decidedly different direction. You see, Gorr's life is just the worst. He believes the gods will protect him and his family, but then his entire family is killed by starvation and earthquakes, so he rethinks the whole gods thing. Gorr decides that he's going to travel the universe and kill all the gods he can find as revenge for not answering his prayers. And as luck would have it, he finds something called All Black the Necro Sword, which is a sword with the power to generate dark energy. While holding the sword, Gorr can spawn an infinite number of minions and, more importantly, dark energy weapons. And this isn't just me saying this. One of the producers of Thor Ragnarok, Brad Winterbaum, explicitly stated that, quote, a lot of the design of Hela is a combination of the early Jack Kirby stuff, but also, especially the power set, the villain Gorr, who has a very specific power set of being able to manifest an infinite number of weapons. We're doing a version of that. Not exactly, but a version of that for Hela in our movie. Because in the books, Hela can kind of touch people and they die, and sometimes she can do all sorts of different things, and we really tried to specify and narrow it into very specific skill sets. So, in an attempt to both simplify Hela's powers and make Ragnarok more visually engaging, the movie team grabbed that ability from Gorr and gave it to Hela. The last comic character I want to touch on is someone named Pericus. He's a member of a race called Dark Gods. A long time ago, Pericus' wife was killed by an Asgardian, and Pericus swore that he and the rest of the Dark Gods would get revenge, so they lead this big war on Asgard. Odin beats him and imprisons him. Years later, Pericus is accidentally freed, and he starts fighting Asgard, so Thor and Hercules and the Destroyer Armor team up to fight him. And unlike all these other characters, we know that Pericus influenced Hela in some way, because in an interview with IGN, Taika Waititi, the director of Thor Ragnarok, revealed that Pericus was going to be in the movie. It's not clear if he was going to be the main villain or he was going to work with Hela, but he was going to be in there. So maybe Pericus is where the imprisoned under Asgard until accidentally let free came from. But Pericus' main contribution to Hela is likely the fact that Pericus is one of a few comic characters who has broken Thor's hammer. In Pericus' case, he used his gigantic magic energy scythe to cut Mjolnir in half. And he's not alone. A bunch of other characters have broken Thor's hammer in the comics, including the Destroyer Armor from the first Thor movie, the Molecule Man, Ulik and Fenrir, a Celestial, and even Thor's grandfather Bor. It's not an all that common occurrence, but it happens more often than you'd expect. And since she has never done it in the comics, it's likely that the idea of Hela breaking Thor's hammer came from Pericus. Alright, last one. This isn't a Marvel Comics thing, but I believe, maybe more than any of the other characters, Hela is influenced by the Hebrew angel of death. In the Hebrew Bible, God has an angel named Mashhit that he sends out to kill enemies of the Israelites. And Thor Ragnarok is, at its core, a story about the conflict between an Old Testament God and a New Testament God. Hela represents the Old Testament. She's part of Odin's conquering army, his executioner. She harkens back to an imperial Asgard that's led by a vengeful killer, fire and brimstone, all that stuff. Thor represents the New Testament. After having a son, Odin values life and peace more than before. He avoids conflict, and instead of a warrior, he needs a wise king who can protect the people of the Nine Realms from evil. A Jesus, if you will. This is made most apparent by the focus on Christian iconography in Odin's temple. Thor and Odin have halos that are reminiscent of medieval Christian art. Taking Hela out of hell and putting her at Odin's side as an angel of death gives Hela and Thor a more interesting relationship, but more importantly, further complicates Thor's relationship with Odin and challenges his idea of what makes a good king. By the end of the film, Thor's reluctantly decided to lead his people and will, in the future, have have to make decisions about to what lengths a king should go to protect his people. Hela will remind Thor that Odin made difficult and often misguided choices and that Asgard has a history of imperfect rulers. And this idea of the imperfect leader has been present in a bunch of recent Marvel movies. Characters like Yondu in Guardians 2 and the Ancient One in Doctor Strange challenge our hero's idea of moral compromise in the face of the greater good. And judging by the trailer, that's going to be a big part of T'Challa's journey in Black Panther. Giving Hela a more complex backstory helped to make Ragnarok a more interesting movie, but also changed the character of Thor in some really significant ways. Hela was visual and she was dangerous, but most importantly, she was personal. She just wasn't Hela. And that's okay. So those are just my thoughts. Let me know in the comments if you think there's anybody I missed, any other characters that you think inspired Hela. Like and share this video with friends of yours that like the Marvel movies. But most importantly, subscribe to this channel. I make more of these. I've got a video about how Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy is an amalgamation of other villains. It's pretty good. I've also got a video about how all the villains in superhero movies lose their color and become big gray monsters, which from what I've seen in Justice League seems like it's going to hold up. And last but not least, follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I am @NationofNando. That's all I've got. See you next time.